Dr. Shane, it's a pleasure and an honor to see you again and again. Every time we meet at dinners, we meet at gatherings, and we do not stop talking about Lebanon, the beauty of Lebanon, the power of Lebanon, from someone who has been away from Lebanon that much.
Yes.
And yet still feels Lebanon running in the veins.
Yes.
Before starting all these details and understanding that Lebanon DNA that we try to push away but doesn't want to go out and is part of our bones and blood. Let's go on a quick journey about you,
Yes.
your love for Lebanon,
Yes.
why, and what is the organization you're part of and what is it doing for Lebanon nowadays?
Yeah, I was away from Lebanon since I was 12 years old, and I didn't go for 19 years till I was 31 years old. I won a public speaking competition, and with the prize money, I decided it was just a moment in time to visit. And one of my greatest and most vivid recollections of that first journey was that I took a haircut in Beirut at a very humble place, but he had all these certificates on the wall from France, how well he cuts hair. And it was not a very good economic time, and the shop was empty. I was the only person. And he asked me about where you're from. The Lebanese people do this, yes. and as a result, I told him how much I really was enjoying Lebanon. I said, you know what? There's a spirit about the people here that's unmistakable. You cannot possibly imagine what I'm feeling right now. So, and he was so taken by my story. He said, I don't want to take any money for the haircut. I said, listen, إنه الشغل منه مقطع بعضه. Like it's like poor man. He's a humble man. I said, no, I insist I must pay. And he said, no, you will not pay because you are the greatest and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I took out $20. I had $20 in my pocket and I threw it on the counter. And I said, no, you must take this because I like the haircut. And by the way, with the way my hair is, it gets less and less every year. So you need to be more skillful to make it look like there's a lot. Yeah. So anyway, and he ran after me into the street with the $20 trying to give it back to me, but I didn't accept.
Lebanese generosity.
That is absolute Lebanese hospitality at its quintessential best. And that's what I felt. And since then, I've been many times. Of course, in the last 3 years, I've been the president of the World Lebanese Cultural Union in Sydney, a really tremendous organization that's interested as an NGO in creating charitable donations to the Lebanon. And we give food aid, we give medical aid, we give medicines, prescription medicines for the poor. We just ordered 200 people to have blood tests for free. We gave nearly 1,000 baby milk powder tins to the mothers that don't have them, that can't breastfeed their children. We feel a great connection. And to be honest, I was born in Beirut and to an Australian Lebanese mother and an Australian dad, but I feel an incredible sense of proximity to that place, that little place. And I could say, absolutely, Anthony, the same for all these people that I ask to come to our functions and parties. They, amazingly, some of them are born here. Some of them have not even been to Lebanon. But as soon as I say, we're doing a party for Lebanon, they come in droves. They come, they love the place. So when you say that the Lebanese spirit runs in your veins, it is true.
Instead of starting from the end and saying why, what makes Lebanon Lebanon, and why do we like Lebanon, and why are we proud to be Lebanese, let's take it from the other side and ask the question, what made all these people envy Lebanon? 6,000 years in the making, probably 7,000 years in the making.
Yeah.
Civilization, lots of civilizations, of which each stayed for 200, 300, 400 years sometimes. We probably learned from them, but all of them came and wanted a piece of this land. What made them all want that little tiny hole in the wall called Lebanon?
Yeah, well, I in my study of history, it's probably 3 or 4 things. We had water. Virtually none of the Arab countries have an abundance of water. We have a natural landscape that also produces a lot of fruit and vegetables. And for invading armies, that's a very nice pit stop. For 80,000 men that have gone with Alexander the Great or with the Mamluks or with the Arabs, it's a really good place to stop. But I think the landscape, when I'm there, I'm still, no matter how many times you see it, those majestic mountains, the shoreline, those ancient cities, you know, that are on the coastline. And I think the Lebanese have a unique spirit. They love to entertain. I would say out of all the countries I've been to, and I've been to so many, I don't think there is a greater spirit of hospitality than the Lebanese own. You go into a restaurant in Ashrafiyeh and they say it has a jungle theme. This is one time we were there. I said, okay, anyway, we turn up at 10 o'clock. I'm thinking we're very late. No one's in the restaurant. So they said, sorry, it's booked out. I said, sorry, we took a booking. No, we don't have your booking. But don't worry, sit at the bar and relax. I took all my cousins out to thank them for looking after us and our friends. And the owner of the restaurant comes out, I'm Australian Lebanese like you. Ahla wa sahla, ahla into ba'yoni, into arasi, into, I don't know, come and have cocktails, come and drink. You know, $300 of cocktails later, we're so happy, and he's found us a table. We now go inside. I mean, it's got to be the greatest culture for hospitality and for introducing people to food and drink that you've ever seen.
Lebanese resilience, if you want to, in my opinion, if you want to put one description for Lebanese, is resilience. So again, 6,000 years, definitely Phoenicians have went all around and toured and discovered and through their know-how and knowledge around the world. But again, we have passed through lots of long occupation. You've mentioned of which the Romans, you've mentioned of which the Mamluk, the Ottomans, etc. And the Arabs definitely. And this proves that it's شعب ما بيستسلم.
Yes, it's true.
And how is this today, how would I say it, how is this reflected or portrayed with the 16 million expats around the world?
Well, I think that the diaspora has been incredibly successful. I think on a pound by pound basis, it punches not one division above its weight, but 5 or 6 divisions above its weight. It's a small country with a relatively small diaspora in total number. But if you look at the Brazilian Lebanese, the American Lebanese, the Australian Lebanese, whom I know very well in Sydney and Melbourne, they are incredibly successful. And that's because I think that the Lebanese have never lacked the intellect and the ingenuity and the resilience of spirit that produces success. What they've lacked is a framework of governance that allows for an even playing field. And so they didn't find it perhaps for many periods in our home country, but they found it in the West. And they found it in other countries where there is a framework which allows you, whilst you are successful, not to be undercut by somebody who's breaking the rules. And so if you look at, say, the Lebanese in Sydney, how amazingly successful they've been.
They are.
And they rally. Honestly, I have these incredible functions. I ask them to come. We're having one for Gibran coming up soon. I hope you can come. And honestly, they just, as soon as they hear, and this is for Lebanon, this is for this is for Dr. Geha, I want to come, I want this, I want to donate, I want to give. And that to me is a part of the embodiment of that resilient spirit that never forgets where it came from. It never forgets. And yes, we are divided, but everyone's divided. I mean, take a first world country like the Americans. The Republicans can't stand the Democrats. They can't stand them. So division is actually not necessarily a fault. It could even be a sign of maturity. I was with the Chancellor of Sydney University, the Vice Chancellor of Sydney University, a guy who was educated at Oxford, a brilliant man called Michael Spence, some years ago. And he said to me, I said, what about the dysfunction in the West and so on, about these people wanting to call the president names and the president's calling the opposition leader names? And he said to me, you know what we must never forget? And I said, what, Vice Chancellor? And he said, we must never forget that we have to disagree well. We have to disagree well. And that's actually a great lesson for the maturity of any democracy, that we may have disagreements. That's part of life. You may disagree with your wife sometimes. You may disagree with your children. That's not a fault. But the level of maturity with which this agreement is handled is what produces a better nation, a good nation.
What do we know about Lebanese food? Why is Lebanese food so majestic?
In my opinion, of all the Mediterranean foods, the Lebanese food is particularly special, in my opinion, because it has layers of flavor. It's very refined, it's delicate. And also, I think the range of the cuisine. So you can go to other places, but the range of the cuisine is what they call stodgy. It's just rice and meat, rice and capsicum, rice and tomato. It's very simple stuff, 3 ingredients, nothing else. Whereas if you look at the Lebanese food, even when it has 2 or 3 ingredients, it's still got refinement of flavor. And I think that's very unique. Also, the number of vegetarian dishes, perhaps developed by the Christians for Lent, for the 40 days of Lent, but that huge range where you can go 12, 15, 20 days with a different 2 or 3 meals each day without once changing, needing to repeat a meal or eating any flesh is in itself a power that not many cuisines have. A lot of European cuisines, sausage and potato. I mean, I don't want to name names, but but you go to Central Europe, and if you take out sausage, potato, and cabbage out of the diet, you've wrecked the cuisine. راحت القصة كلها. So I think, and I, even Lebanese sweets, when I eat our ma'moul or our betlewa, and I compare it to some of the other Mediterranean sweets, it is so much more refined. It's more delicate. It's more flavoursome. And I think the food has become world famous for those reasons. So lots of people say they love the food, and there are people who are completely unrelated to the Lebanese DNA who just adore Lebanese food, want to eat it all the time. And we're good at it. We're good at presenting it. We have an art to the way we present our food. There's an art form to it, which I think has to be admired.
You know that on a Lebanese table, on a Lebanese meze table or meza table, there's more than 200 plates. And what people do not know is that these 200 plates are not enjoyed at home. They are festive plates. What makes the Lebanese cuisine what the Lebanese cuisine is, it's not about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about hundreds of plates. My record is 83. So
Wow.
I've taken a picture of a table. We have made on it 83 different plates. Different. I'm not saying hummus with different flavors. It's different plates, 83. And the count is 200. Meza, table, food you can eat and enjoy in a restaurant. On another hand, what people definitely don't know is what we eat at home has nothing to do with hummus and kibba and sambusik. So at home we eat yakhnet. So we eat frike, we eat burghul, we eat lentils, we eat rice, we eat mjadra, and you can go up to 100. And there are names and plates, mughrabiya, that probably people do not know from a village to the next. So if you take the 200 on a table, call them festive meals, and 200 homemade meals, and the adaptation to cuisines that we have created, مثل macaroni بحليب.
Yeah.
Lots of things that we've taken from
Italians
others
and done. Yeah.
and done on a cuisine. There's no cuisine in the world that does it. Yes, let's say it. The cuisine in Germany, the cuisine in the UK, the cuisine...
Very basic.
Exactly. The
Very
cuisine
stodgy.
probably in Armenia as is, or the old Russian Federation, serves one purpose. If they have lots of a cold, you need to eat something that will make you warm. If you're drinking beer, you would need that sausage aside. And Lebanese have the cuisine that you will eat for 365 days a year, diversified, 70% naturally vegan in a world where everybody is pushing
so
for that.
special.
Exactly.
So special.
And there is no trans fat in it. Despite us frying falafel, for example, oil doesn't go in. So we do not use trans fat. We do not have anything that is not healthy.
Right.
Everything that we fry
Yeah.
just cooks it from the outside. Sambusik, oil does not go in. Kibbe, oil does not go in. So at the end, the heat bakes it or cooks it, and then the oil gives it a crunch on the outside. If you look at everything, people would say now, watching us, بس بتاكلوا لية or lamb fat.
Yeah.
This is natural fat, which melts at 37%.
Yeah.
It's not cooked trans fat the American way.
Right.
So if you go and look at all of these, the Lebanese cuisine is phenomenal.
It's very special. And I think it brings lots of people together. The food always brings people together. It's also something that unites us as a race of people. I also think we shouldn't underestimate the exquisite nature of the wine that goes with the food. So when you show people the best of Lebanese wine, and I've served some of the best Chateau Moussards at my function, and now I've got the Fatra and the other really nice wines, reds and whites. People are astounded. I'm talking about, red wine and white wine connoisseurs in Australia who say, my God, this is good. My God, this is so good. And you can see why it wins awards in Paris. And I was recently...
You've heard the last story of Dow.
You should say it.
So Penfolds, the biggest winery in the world,
Yes.
and the most diversified winery in the
They're
world.
Australian.
They're Australian, definitely. Your Penfold of Australia has bought Dow, which is one of the biggest Los Angeles or California wineries, Lebanese-owned winery, for $1 billion. So when Penfold, the number one winery of Australia, which I adore the wine definitely, goes all the way to the other continent of the States and buys a Lebanese winery that is not from Lebanon, Dow, G-A-O-U, that means a lot. And that means that Lebanese, you know how many wineries you have in Lebanon today? 87 in that small little country. Yes. Lebanon is, to put it into perspective, Lebanon is 10,452 kilometers. Sydney is 12,000 kilometers, square kilometers. So Lebanon is smaller than a city.
And Lebanon yet fits 7 times into Tasmania, our smallest state, 7 times. Tasmania is roughly 70,000 square kilometers.
And this is how diversified this country is. So you were speaking about the wines, yes. And if we go back in time, wines have started in Lebanon. Yeah. They have come back to Lebanon, helped by the French 150 years back, when the Jesuits restarted it or taught us again or reminded us of wines. But Romans, and we all Romans, and the Temple of Bacchus, more than 2,000 years ago, have started making wine in Lebanon. And when we tour around the villages of Lebanon, there is history in every single square meter. There is something to see and take a picture of in every single square meter. And while walking into the forests, we would see on the stones places that are not even marked, people that do not even know exist, big jars carved for winemaking. Right. And that is thousands and thousands of years ago. So 150 years back, Ksara, the Jesuits, came back and reminded us that we have probably the best grapes in the world. And yes, in the Bekaa, but not the Bekaa itself, which we rediscovered again a couple of years back. That is in Aineta at 1,900. So the Bekaa is at 900. In that same Bekaa, which is the food of Lebanon, but 1,000 meters higher in Aineta, which is also in the Bekaa behind North Lebanon or El Ariz, we have what French described as the best grapes in the world. What makes one of the great wines, and yet the wineries of Lebanon are to be discovered.
But I love the flavor. I think the reds are just very delicate. I mean, Australian reds really pack a punch. They're heavy reds. The Lebanese reds are lighter. They're more interesting for me, and I love the Blanc de Blanc Chardonnay. I love I tasted a wine and I served it at my last function called Petit Couvent, which is a white. It's a Sauvignon Blanc, which I thought was just delightful. This year, for this function, we're going to serve a Riesling from Lebanon. And we have the cognac from Batroun. You're not allowed to call it cognac, so they call it brandy, I think. So, but it's cognac. It's as good as anything I've tasted out of France, and I'm serving that at the function. I just think, you know what? We're so blessed that the country can still produce, no matter what's happened and what could have happened to the wineries and to all these places through the difficult times. It still produces world-class food and wine, world class.
Definitely. I can speak about food for hours and hours and tell you about the story of Kibbenay and the story of Taboul and the story of Fatouche and the stories of a million other things. But that will do another episode. I probably have something to eat in front of us. Why did the Romans, with their 10, 15 temples in Lebanon, that small little tiny country, 15 Roman temples, of which the biggest in the world called Baalbek, why did they choose Lebanon?
In my read of history, again, I would say the Romans were one of the world's most successful civilizations for 2 reasons. The Romans built empires rather than took from empires. A lot of empires essentially ruled people so they could usurp them. The Romans were much more interested in building the empire. They built it for trade. They built 420,000 kilometers of road were built in the first century of the Roman Empire. That's remarkable when you think about it. And that was for two reasons: to facilitate trade between the races that they conquered, and two, to make sure that the Roman army was no more than one marching day away from any border of the empire. And that is what created the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, so that you could always trade in peace without being interrupted, because the army protected the borders. And the Romans found Lebanon to be, again, a place where there was water and grapes and food and olives and peaches and all of those beautiful things that Lebanon has become famous for. And for them, it was almost the most convenient place to stay, because it's sort of at the crossroad between East and West. If you're going to Parthia, which is now Persia, and that was an empire they fought for a period of time, it was just kind of on the way and in the middle. When they conquered the all of North Africa, by the way, Carthage had been conquered a long time before that. And that's because they defeated Hannibal in 300 odd BC. So really remarkable. And you know, you go to Baalbek and people tell me, is it that good? And I'll tell you what my impressions are as someone who's admired, as an engineer, architecture and buildings, as well as someone who loves history. Those buildings, the Temple of Bacchus, the largest surviving Roman temple anywhere in the world. There is no larger Roman temple built anywhere in the world, and it's in Lebanon. When you walk in, you're this small and the wall is this big of the temple. And the temple wall is so ornate, it's been engraved by hundreds of craftsmen, and it's designed to do one thing. As you walk in, you have to say, God, Rome is great. God, Rome is great. And I've been there many times, and every time I go back, I say, I'm not going to think this. You know, I've already seen it, but it does it to me every time. Every time I walk in, you walk in and you think, oh God, Rome is great. And I think that is a power of the artisanship, the architecture, the power of the design, the power of not just the monolith of the building, but the people that conceived the ideology. And to name it after the god of wine, of course, the largest temple ever built is the Temple of Jupiter, of which only those columns remain that are on our stamps and coinage. But that's no longer in existence. But the Temple of Bacchus is still all intact, apart from the roof, which was originally made of timber. And it's just remarkable. I mean, and remember that 6 Roman emperors that ruled all of the Roman Empire were Lebanese. I will claim them as Lebanese. They have Phoenician blood. So if we tested their DNA and yours, we would have DNA in common. And those 6 emperors were Septimus Severus, who ruled from the 190s to 211. His son, Caracalla, whose real name is Antoninus. Then his brother Geha, who ruled for a short period. Then you had an unusual emperor called Elagabalus, who liked to wear women's clothes. And then you had an emperor called Septimus Alexander, or Alexander Severus, depending on how you classify his words. And then you had, a little bit later, another emperor called Philip the Arab. Now, all of them have Phoenician DNA, all of them. And they presided over a magnificent period of the Roman Empire. So Septimus, for instance, came from Libya, from a town in northern Libya, which was part of the Carthaginian Empire. So when the Romans conquered it, and this was a great strength of the Roman Empire. I wish we will have this strength in Lebanon today. And that is that the Romans were not obsessed with dynastic lines of succession. You didn't have to have your son and grandson and grandson. The Ottomans, by the way, have a direct lineage from Uthman in 1299 all the way to the last emperor, to the last sultan. The Arabs have, in the Umayyad dynasty and then in the Abbasids dynasty, a line of succession. The British monarchy still has it. The royal family of Japan has a total royal line of dynastic succession. The Romans didn't have it. And so if you were an amazing soldier or a great person, you could be elected to the senatorial class. And then from there, you could become a consul or a Roman and eventually a Roman emperor. And that's what happened to our people. I was with the Premier of New South Wales, a former Premier of New South Wales, Bob Carr, who's a friend of this office and friend of mine. And I was joking with him on stage in my last interview with him. And I said, he's a great expert on the Roman Empire. So I was joking with him. I said, you know, we've had 6 emperors that have my DNA, Lebanese, and you're English, and you've had 0. So the score actually is 6-0, Premier. And he laughed and he said, no, you know, the first emperor was pretty good, but the second one was a tyrant and a warmonger. The third one died very quickly. So really you only had 3. Of course, the right answer to that would have been that's still 3-0 Premier. But I just wanted to have fun. Essentially, we have so much to be proud of. I really do feel that. Our history is rich with success. Our influence on the world is completely remarkable, completely remarkable. And we continue to exhibit those features in our diaspora. You look at the people that have come to Australia, that have gone to the US. You look at Charles Malik, that wrote the Constitution of the World Lebanese Cultural Union, but also wrote the Declaration of Human Rights with none other than Eleanor Roosevelt, who represented us in the United Nations. You look at Gibran, whom we're celebrating on the 2nd of December in our party. I mean, you know, Gibran today is the most quoted author in the world at weddings and funerals, of any book, of any era, of any time. I mean, you talk about a little country. I mean, aren't we punching 5 divisions above our weight class? We're probably welterweight, and we're punching in the light heavyweight division. I think that's pretty special.
When you go to Lebanon, we start by Jbel, Baalbek, Beirut. We go to Batroun, we have food, fun, etc. And time passes so quickly that we forget that the main thing, the main building, the main entity we need to visit is definitely the museum. And we forget about it. Actually, my kids probably went with the school. I went once, and every time I pass through it, I say, I need to bring the kids again. Did you visit the museum?
Well, I visited for the first time 3 visits ago, and I've repeated that 3 times. So I went once, twice, 3 times. The reason is it fascinated me beyond description. The Beirut Museum has in it around 1,150 artifacts, all of which come from one country, Lebanon. There are very few museums that have this feature, and that's a testimony to the richness of its history, the 59 civilizations that have conquered Lebanon. So you have 59. So you have Assyrians, you have Sumerian, you have Canaanites, you have Arabs, you have
And that's
Ottomans.
what's left, because the 59 took everything.
That's right.
That's what's left.
Quite amazing. But I'm fascinated by so many things in that museum. The most fascinating by far, well, there's lots of fascinating, but the thing that I think stands out for me more than anything else that I can just stand in front of over and over is the tomb, the sarcophagus of King Ahiram of Byblos. And what's interesting about that is on the lid of the sarcophagus, which is made of stone, is inscribed the very first ever words written by a human hand using an alphabet. And why is that significant? Because if you think about it, the invention of the alphabet is the truest foundation of civilization. You may be a tribe, you may be able to even speak a language, but that's not civilization. I'll tell you why. An animal, a rhinoceros, can teach its daughter or son a little bit about how to survive, and it'll go shortly within 1 generation, and it'll never survive beyond. The ability of humanity to progress was centered around knowledge, being able to transpose beyond 1 generation. And that requires written language. And that written language could only really be perfected when you use an alphabet. Because here's what happens. As you invent a new word, you see a new object, which is what humanity is doing. You use the same letters into the word. You arrange them to make the sound or the word. And that creates the ability to transpond thoughts from one person to the next to the next. So when you read what Aristotle wrote in the 5th century BC, you can feel exactly what he felt. You can think exactly what he thought because of the written word. And the very first written words that humanity found for itself anywhere were Phoenician. And they're our ancestors and they're our letters. And here's the fascinating thing. You look at the Phoenician letters, and above the line, this is a geological sheet, an anthropological sheet that I was given, and above the line are all the Western languages. Below the line are all the Semitic languages. So that's Armenian, the Nabatean, which is no longer in existence. Then you've got Hebrew. You've got all these languages that are Arabic. They're all Semitic languages. Now, the interesting thing is they're written from right to left, right? And think of Arabic, it has no vowels. Arabic is all consonants, and the vowel sounds are created by the dhammi and the fatha and the kasra on the consonants. And then above the line, it goes to ancient Greek, and from ancient Greek to ancient Latin, or to Latin, and from Latin to all the modern known languages like English and French. And they all have vowels. So it's interesting for me to observe how the Phoenician language translated things that were consonants into consonants below the line, and into the same letters translated into vowels above the line. So for instance, the letter ha, which is a consonant in Arabic, became a or e in English. It's quite amazing. And then you see this inscription on this tomb. You see this inscription, and he's written about himself, I am the greatest, I'm whatever he wrote. But you know, at 1,000 years before the birth of the Lord Jesus Christ, you can see the words of the first inscribed human hand using the most powerful influence that influenced civilization throughout all of human history. And it's written by a Phoenician, and it's written for us, the Lebanese, to remember.
That should mean a lot. That should mean a lot for every single person that says, I don't want to be Lebanese anymore, I can not trust the country anymore, just want to leave, I want to search for a better future. We should never forget who we are, because this means a lot. And we started 3,000 years ago, and then everything beyond. And what did we add to the world? Probably we didn't add much the last couple of years in terms of buildings and science. And we're not Dubai, and we're not New York, and we're not Sydney. But what we've added to the world in the last thousands of years is way more and needs to be remembered.
But Anthony, my dear doctor, the world is a long history of events. And just because we have a blip in the history today, it doesn't mean that this history will not be shiny again at a point in the future. There were many times in every civilization where things didn't look great. There were times when the French were ruled by the British. There were times when the British had French Norman kings who changed their world, and yet things changed later on and different things happen. And you know what? People say that Lebanon's going through suffering and Lebanon's going through hardship. But let me remind everyone, there really is no great first world country today that didn't go through a period of hardship or suffering. So that's not unusual or unique to the Lebanese. So you think of the American Civil War, you think of the American Revolution, you think of how many permutations the British had, the Magna Carta in 1215, you know, the conquest by so many races of Britain, and then eventually to produce the War of the Roses, where the royal families of Britain killed each other for the best part of 150 years. So, you know, suffering is kind of a part of your evolution into a good society. So, as they say, democracy and the good life, at least on a civilization level, somehow had to be earned. And we're probably earning our stripes now.
You talked about Jbel. I wanted to add something. You know why they chose Jbel? Jbel, if you look at it, Byblos, Jbel, yeah. Not only the city, but all the region of Jbel. It's super well surrounded. In a way, it cannot be attacked, except from the sea. So if you look at Jbel, you have from that side, which we call Shika, is Ras al-Sha'a,
Yeah.
that big stone curve. And if you want to enter through the north down to Jbeil, you need to take a boat, so you cannot just walk in and come in. And from the other side, we have Nahar al-Kalb, which again is a big stone that goes directly into the water. So it's surrounded and covered from this side and this side. So that major area that is Jbeil was very well protected from all sides. And if you look at it and all the mountains around it,
And then they did a seawall.
exactly, it's a seawall from both sides. And then they decided to create the fortress in the middle that can connect them to all the inner lands, and they opened the Roman route that takes them from Jbeil all the way down to Damascus, which is one of the oldest cities in the world as well.
The oldest continuously inhabited city in the world is Damascus. Beirut would count as one of the world's oldest cities. It's remarkable for me to see so many things. When I was in Jbeil, I wanted to touch the stone. I wanted my hand to touch a stone that was formed by another Lebanese human hand in 7,000 BC. 9,000 years ago, that hand. And that wall was not made by nature. That wall was most definitely made by the hand of a man, right? Or a woman, but say a man. So that's very remarkable, to share that feeling with somebody who built it. I think for me as well, like, there are so many fascinations. I still remember when I went to Jbeil, just looking at the majesty of the construction, the majesty of the seawall, the inner wall. I mean, really, if you can't enjoy that, I don't think anybody could possibly not be impressed with Lebanon. Then you go up and you talk about the connection between the different cities. So you're talking about Damascus, the world's continuously inhabited city, and fascinating city, mentioned in the Bible. In fact, St. Paul had the revelation on the road to Damascus. As I told one of our former prime ministers in a recent interview, a prime minister called Tony Abbott, I said, Prime Minister, you know, one day I will take you with me, and we can still walk on the original Roman cobblestones that connected Anjar with Damascus, which was originally the road that connected Beirut with Damascus, but we still have a section of it. But that very cobblestone, your feet could touch the same cobblestones the feet of St. Paul walked on in the first century when he had the revelation that converted him to Christianity on the road to Damascus. That is unbelievable, isn't it? And then you have the Arab history there. So you've got Khalifa al-Walid came and built two palaces there, one for him and one for the women, the women's palace and his palace. They were interestingly built in the Byzantine Roman style, because this was, of course, in the 600s. So it wasn't long after the Byzantines collapsed in 636 at Battle of Yarmouk. And this was a famous Khalifa called Al-Walid. And he built this in what they called the Roman square. But the Roman square was not a square. It's a rectangle, but it's called the Roman square. And the architecture with the Roman arches is very distinctive, very distinctive. So here's this great crossover between what the Romans and the Byzantines had been taught by the previous generations and the glory of the Roman Empire being translated and passed on to the Arabs, certainly in their architecture.
We didn't talk about the plants, nature, trees.
Yeah.
Lebanon has something very amazing to talk about. And
Yeah.
that land that only has rain probably 60 days a year, 300 days of sun, the four distinct, and you living in Australia would understand what does it mean, the four distinct seasons. When in summer it rains and in winter it's hot. And you go back to Lebanon and say, yes, summer is summer, winter is winter. And the four distinct seasons, you can ski, you can swim, and all of this made it a very beautiful and unique land with lots of vegetation and trees that are unique for us.
I found the vegetation really amazing. I think the cedars that are mentioned so many times in the Bible, tens of times in the Bible, the cedars of Lebanon, the Cedrus libani, as they call it in Latin. I mean, touching a living organism that's 4 and a bit thousand years old, 4 and a bit thousand years old, and still alive today. I just thought, you know what, if that thing could talk, it would correct history. It could give you the chronicle with great accuracy of every civilization that came and went and what happened in between. But it can't talk, but it's still alive and you can touch it. And how amazing to have still a few thousand of them left. Of course, the story goes is that because these were hardwoods of such an amazing nature, they were used to roll the stones, the large stones that built the pyramids, the 3 pyramids of Giza. And I would believe that. They were used, of course, to build the first ships that sailed in the Mediterranean, because that type of timber is impervious to water. So it allows you to build great ships with it. It's a remarkable richness, but you know what's nice about Lebanon? The produce that is found everywhere. You're driving in the car, you will see the olives, you will see this, you'll see the apricots, the sfargil, the quince, you'll see the oranges, the lemons, it's unreal. And then when you go to the coast, but you know, like I was with the driver on my last trip. This is a very nice thing. He was a lovely man. And he goes, oh, you know, boss, you can come down here, you can eat from any hatle, and all you got to say is Allah yirzuq sahib al-milik. Allah yirzuq sahib al-milik, you can eat from anything. I said, surely that can't be true. And he goes, yes, yes, it's true. So anyway, we stopped at a small shop. I bought a pocket knife and a peeler. and I stopped at a few of the fields and I took some. And the fruit is beautiful. I think the fruit in Lebanon tastes better than anywhere in the world. Australia has incredible fruit and an incredible range of fruit because it has 8 climates in the one continent. But Lebanon's different. The range is smaller, but the produce is super fresh because you eat it almost the day it's picked. And the cherries, oh my gosh, the cherries in Lebanon. Now, I didn't get to try the rat bikfaya since I was a child, but I understand that's legendary.
They are. And the cherries of Hammana, and the figs of Saida, and the bananas of Damour, the apples of Sharri, and all the amazing fruits and vegetables.
So in Australia, I think we have, at any one time, 8 or 9 or 10 varieties of apple that you can buy. In Lebanon, the range I thought was smaller, but it's very, very fresh. It's very tasty because it's sort of picked very soon before you eat it. Whereas here, it's picked a while before you eat it. Yeah.
If only trees in Lebanon could talk, we have stories about lots of trees. Cedars are known definitely because they have been used by the Arabs, by the Ottomans, by the pharaohs, and by every single one who has built a ship thousands of years back.
Yeah.
And definitely we put it on our tree on our flag. But we cannot forget the juniper trees, which cover all our trees, all our mountains from 2100 until 3083, and also are thousands of years old. And let me tell you the story of the olive trees. So we have two villages in Lebanon.
My goodness.
The village of Pshali and the village of Kaukaba. These pretend or claim to have the oldest olive trees in the world. Right. Let's not say in the world, but probably around our region. It can be true. It can be true. They have been tested to be older than 2,500 by lab test, but nobody can really confirm because they are as big as 7 meters, 8 meters in diameter. So you cannot, you cannot prove because the tree has been went into pieces. It's empty on the inside, but if you reimagine it, it's just one that went old and old and old and old. So where they took a piece of here, a piece of here, you do not have the circular parts of the tree to really prove it's 2,000 or 4,000 years back.
Right.
But in Pshali, it's the only olive trees in the world, more than 4,000 years old.
Wow.
That are covered during winter by snow, and usually olives do not go well with snow, and yet stay alive for as long as we remember. In Pshali, they claim them to be the olive trees of Moses.
Moses, yeah.
And in Kaukaba, they claim them to be the olive trees of Jesus Christ, and he passed under them and blessed them while he was going on his tour and going all the way up to Saida with his mother. So this land has been blessed. If we believe or not, if we're Christians or Muslim or whatever we want to be, this land has been blessed. Do you believe in that?
I do. I believe that it's been blessed because it's got so many riches, so many gifts that have become its own. And, you know, what an honor to think that Jesus Christ walked on that soil. What an honor that is for Lebanon to have this. I just marvel as well, just every single city and town's uniqueness and qualities. And you look at, even you go to Sidon and Tyre, to Sidon and Sur. I talked about the Roman emperors. You know, every single Roman emperor, from Julius and Augustus in 44 BC, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar in the 1st century BC, all the way to Romulus Augustus in the west and Constantine the 11th in the east, 1453, the fall of the Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire. Every single one of them wore the color purple. And that color came from the small Lebanese seaport of Tyre or Sur. And it's still till today called Tyrian purple. And it came from a small carnivorous sea snail called the murex, which the Phoenicians discovered at about 1000 BC, that if you crushed 1,000 of those and boiled them in hot water, you could dye white cloth purple. And that was the first con job of the fashion industry, right? Because white, that's $1, but purple, now, wow, that's $1,000. So suddenly you were buying cloth at 1,000 times its true value because it had the color purple. And no one, and every single Roman emperor for 1453 years wore it. And no one other than the emperor was allowed to wear it. If anyone other than the emperor wore Tyrian purple, they were beheaded. Now, that color has also transcended more than the emperors of Rome. It's gone to the royal families of Europe. You will see variations of Tyrian purple that have transcended and infiltrated into royal families of Europe. And you will see that even the church, which wasn't separated from the king for a very long time, has purple in a lot of its clothing. You will see in the crowning of King Charles III, the latest King of England, that the King Edward crown that he wears has Tyrian purple felt on the inside. And that's the original Tyrian purple. That's our purple. That's our purple.
Definitely. So, which takes us to the last question, which has been proven in the last hour we've been discussing, talking about is education. And when we say education, is not only about learning biology or math, mathematics or engineering, is educating our youth to understand Lebanon so they can love it. Educating them not to forget their land, not to forget their roots. And saying only go back to Lebanon, Lebanon has good food is not enough. So what would you say to all the parents, all the new generations that are living outside of Lebanon? What kind of education about their origins and their countries they need to know and understand so we keep the legacy going and we keep loving and showcasing to the world who we truly are?
I would say that there is so much to be gained for both the country and for the person visiting. And I would say that visitation, when it happens, will do something remarkable in its transformation of the individual. You will not believe, I will say to them, my children had never been to Lebanon until 2017. And it was the first Christmas I'd had in Beirut for 38 years. Now, if you haven't had Christmas in Beirut, you haven't had Christmas yet. It's a very special place to have Christmas. And when I took my children, we had been to Vienna, we had been to Athens, and then I took them with me. My youngest daughter was playing music in Vienna and with her school, and I brought them with me and we visited Beirut. And then we visited the rest of Lebanon. And of that trip, my children, who can't speak Arabic, except they know Mjadra and they know Beddik Tekli and Ruhinemi, they know, not much. I mean, I'm grateful that I read and write Arabic, but they can't. And it's just unbelievable when you ask them to reflect on the 23 days that we spent overseas, that their time in Lebanon eclipses the amazing time we spent in Vienna, in Athens, and in overseas countries.
There is something in the land that makes you shiver. There is something in the mood, in the vibe, in the oxygen. There is something about Lebanon, despite all the problems we might be encountering, that just makes you feel different.
The people are just special. The people are uniquely hospitable. I would say you will meet many people that will love you and that will give you and that will care for you wherever you travel, your relatives, your friends. But if you go to see your distant relatives even, or distant friends in Lebanon, you will feel a warmth of relationship you haven't felt before. And it is uniquely Lebanese. It is so unbelievable. Those people, they do everything for you. It is truly special. And I think that's the warmth that a young person or a child feels when they're suddenly engulfed by, and there are some, I mean, my children, for example, they don't know any of these people one-on-one. They don't know any of them personally, I do. But yet, in that proximal relationship that's built in such a short period is a warmth that is hard to describe.